Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to Throwback Thursdays with IFA. Some of you know that India Foundation for the Arts is a grant-making organization. 25 years ago, we started supporting arts and culture projects across the country. And over these many years, we have supported over 600 very exciting projects that look at research, practice, and education in the arts. Before the pandemic hit us and we were all locked down in our internet boxes, we would showcase the work that our grantees do through grant showcases, which were real life events in physical proximity with our audiences across the country. So in a year, we would probably do about 30 to 45 such events across big cities, small towns, and reach out to students, artists, scholars, friends of the arts, people who are excited by the arts, people who support the arts. And when we all got locked down, our first instinct was, how do we share this work? How do we make the work that are the incredible work that our grantees do accessible to you, publicly available to you? So then we started this online grant showcase, and like all of us, you know, we are learning as we are going along. And we are so happy today that today we are going to share with you two projects actually that happened at one site in Goa this time. And the program that both these projects are part of was called the Archival and Museum Fellowships at IFA, supported by the Tata Trust. But before I invite my colleague, Suman Gopinath, who has been the program officer holding this program together for the past 6 years, let me set a few ground rules for those of you who may be new to Zoom. I know by the 4th or 5th month of lockdown, that is unlikely, but still. So we have a little chat box, as you know. So the chat box essentially is for you to chitter-chatter among yourselves, if you have any comments about how fabulous these projects are, or you want to go and see this space that we will be talking about, you can share all that in the chat box. But the chat box is not the space for questions. We have a separate space, if you see, called Q&A. And if you have any specific questions for either of the two presentations, please put it in there. And at the end of this evening, once our grantees have finished making their presentations, they are going to respond to these questions. It'll be great if you can, if your question is framed in such a way that it addresses one particular project, and if it addresses both, then it'll be great if you say so. Then, you know, we won't fumble around figuring out who's going to answer that question. So with that, let us begin. Suman, share a little bit about what this initiative was all about.
Thank you, Arundhati. As Arundhati just mentioned, I look after the Archival and Museum Fellowships program at IFA. This program is about 6 years old, and we have actually made about 35 fellowships with 6 or 7 archives and 7 museums all over the country. Now, the aim of these fellowships actually is to use already existing collections in archives and museums and to make them come alive. Now, we know that, you know, curators also would like to use this, and it's an important resource for them. So curators are given the chance to actually use these collections and to unravel the many layered biographies of these objects, their ever-changing status, and their migration. Museums, as we all know, also, you know, have certain stories to tell, and from certain locations. And we as viewers also have preconceived ideas about these collections. So this program, we hope, will make alternate stories, alternate histories come alive. So this evening, and it's not only coming alive, but also making it visible to a very large audience. So this evening, we're going to hear about Aparajita Bhasin and Lena Vincent's projects at the Goa Chitra Museum, and the different ways in which they have tried to engage with a larger audience over a period of a year. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the Goa Chitra Museum, let me just show you a few images. The Goa Chitra Museum was founded by Victor Hugo Gomes, and it's a cluster of museums. So it's Goa Chitra, Goa Kriti, and Goa Chakra. This is the Goa Chitra Museum, and the museum is an ethnographic museum, and it has more than 40,000 artifacts in it. And it's also dedicated to the agrarian roots of Goa. So as you can see, all these objects here are related to agriculture in some way or the other. Then there's the Goa Chakra Museum. Actually, Goa Chitra was the first to open its doors to the public, and this was in 2009. And then you have the Goa Chakra Museum, which is dedicated to the wheel. And there are different modes of transport that you see here. And these objects have been collected from the beginning of the 20th century. And then there's a Goa Kriti Museum. The Goa Kriti Museum is dedicated to Goa's very rich and cosmopolitan past. And here you have objects from the 16th century. So this is the medical gallery. This is the legal gallery. And this is the music and instruments, musical instruments and furniture gallery. So Leena Vincent and Aparajita Bhasan got fellowships from us, and they worked with this collection for a period of a year. And they, in fact, had a number of activities to engage an audience over this period of time. So today you're going to hear about the different things that they curated at the museum over a period of a year. Leena Vincent will begin her presentation, which will be followed by Aparajita's. And then we open up the conversation for questions that you all might have, either about the presentations or about the museum itself. So let's begin with Leena's presentation. Leena is an art historian and curator, and has worked on several multidisciplinary projects. She has been based in Goa for the past 6 years. Aparajita is an art historian, and in fact, she works on heritage projects in a design company that is based in Goa. She worked very closely with Krishnan on this project, and Krishnan is an experienced and game designer and is currently working on a community-based project with a design studio called Epithet. And we also have Divesh here, who's an artist and who participated in one of the exhibitions that Leena curated called Unraveling Stories. So let me thank you all for being here this evening, and we're really looking forward to this presentation. So Leena, it's over to you now for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Suman. To begin with, I would really like to say thank you to IFA, to Goa Chitra Museum, as well as Victor Hugo Gomes, and the numerous collaborators and other artists I worked with during the entire fellowship, without whom the project would not have been possible. It is a year ago that we actually hosted a large number of the programs, and it is still very fresh in the mind. I would like to actually begin by talking about the various lenses through which I looked at the objects at the museum. I had been in Goa already for around 4.5 years when I began to look at this fellowship, and I felt that the opportunity would really allow me to explore more in terms of the heritage and the history of the Goa landscape as well as the communities. So when I proposed the project, I was actually thinking of looking at around 15 objects perhaps, and exploring them to the full, unraveling stories, as it were, looking at the various dimensions that come up from objects themselves. And during the process of the fellowship, actually, the 15 changed into different numbers because of the collaborators that I involved, and also because of the artists and their visions and the way the project expanded on its own. So I think that's something that happens, that you can frame something right in the start, but it really takes its own journey. So to begin with, as an art historian, I looked at these objects. Suman, could we just have the opening screen, please? I looked at these objects in terms of my art historical understanding, which is, you know, what is the process of museumization of an object? How does an object, which is something of everyday use, perhaps as related to this particular museum, how does it become a museum object? What is added or what is removed? What is the notion of loss? These were some of the questions I was asking myself when I was viewing the objects. Who is a collector? How does a single person gather all these things together? What is the meaning of collection? Particularly in today's day, when we are thinking about representation and we are thinking about decolonization and many different concepts that are related to the museum world, I think that these were important spaces within which to question what we were doing in the museum itself. Then in terms of actually looking at the idea of loss in itself, because a lot of the material in the museum is living heritage to a certain extent, but it's also heritage that is actually getting lost, because these are intrinsic to certain cultural patterns, certain local knowledge, which is slowly changing, I think, the world over. And museums like these are able to preserve these as objects, of course, and to what extent we can conserve and preserve living heritage, that is another layer. So this was another thing that I was thinking of when I was looking at the objects. Many of them are ecologically specific to the zone. If you look at the materials, which I will come back to later also in the presentation, they are very deeply ingrained in the landscape that is Goa. The hills, the wood that grows here, the rivers, you know, the kind of fishing nets they made, everything is related to the local landscape. And that's also changing, because technology, in a sense, and changing machinery is changing the way we make objects, so we produce and use objects. One of the larger ideas were also related to gender specific objects, and this was a very interesting space to look at. Can objects be gendered? Can spaces be gendered? And this was a question that came into some of the discussions I had later with artists as well. And finally, of course, you know, the whole idea of interactions with people and the notion that reality and fiction also can exist together, because these are intangible histories. Many of the stories behind the objects are oral histories. They are mingled with myth and legend, and yet they are very deeply ingrained in the history of the space. So the possibility of looking at objects through a fictional lens is also something that came into the entire picture. And these were the few points that actually framed the way in which the various events took place. Next, please. I'm opening with this slide of a group of children all together because, particularly because this experience as of today is something that we cannot think of. Brushing shoulders with a group of laughing children and allowing them to bump against each other. Well, you know, in today's day, we would all have been wearing masks. But this was a project, a workshop that we did with the Bhatikar Model School. and their teacher Sachin Nayak, who was also part of the exhibition, coordinated it. The students came in, they were introduced to the museums with Victor Hugo Gomes, and they were allowed to make and remember their own stories, go back to days at home with their grandparents, telling them things about these objects, some of them asking questions, and so on. Next, please. So they worked on this series of drawings, which is objects which they responded to in their surroundings. They also beautifully learnt the Konkani names, the local names of all these objects. And it was a learning experience for me as well, because though I feel myself an insider now, I do not know the language, know Konkani, and it was wonderful to be able to talk about specific names and words, etc. Next. The museum's spaces came alive through a variety of workshops that I was able to facilitate in collaboration with a variety of people located in Goa. So this other workshop was by Arundhati Chattopadhyay, a theatre expert, and she came up with a very novel idea of looking at the wheel. That is, the notion of the workshop was named Chakraview, and it was a pun on this entire game of life, but it was also looking at the wheel in a very physical and philosophical level. We had students from the Parsikar College come in here, coordinated by Pritesh Nayak, and the students enjoyed interacting with the objects in the Goa Chakra Museum, using their bodies, using gestures, and using their expressions. So they actually learned how to collaborate, join together in understanding mechanisms, understanding how movements take place, and understanding how different objects are composed and are part of our lives. So this was really a very fascinating workshop, and it was also a sort of experiment, because usually one interacts with museum spaces in a particular way, but this was very physical. So for me, it was really a wonderful learning experience. Next. The students really enjoyed it. They came up with wonderful memories, collective as well as personal. They also delved into histories that the objects sort of gave way to, and here too there was the notion of the fictional. Next, please. Talking about theatre, we also had a collaboration with a theatre group in Goa called Abhivyakti. Next, please. So here we collaborated with heritage advocate and wonderful speaker herself, Heta Pandit, and it was her compilation of OVO songs, that is actually grinding songs, that we explored with this particular event that was actually on March 8th, which is International Women's Day. So the premise of this particular event was the idea of gendered spaces, and how the OVO songs are recording a woman's experience of a domestic space, and living through the eyes of someone who is grinding rice every day, or that pain and that experience and the devotion and the love and the desire, everything comes into these songs. So this was again another experimental project, which was very interesting, and it brought about a lot of interaction on this notion of the gendered object, which in fact is a continuing discussion, and I hope that different people may be perhaps able to put new thoughts into this. Next, please. So the interactions here were also wonderful. At one go, the entire idea of the museum was brought to North Goa, and anyone who is here will understand the sort of distance between South Goa, where the museum is, and North Goa, where I am located, and well, some of the art centers are located. So we were able to bring this whole introduction to Goa Chitra Museum to a very central place, the Sunaparanta Center for the Arts in North Goa, and it was able to encourage a large number of people to go and visit the museum after this. So that was something very beneficial for the outreach. Next, please. Throughout the entire period, I was inviting artists, and these were artists whom I already knew were looking at notions of ancestry, roots, heritage, notions of loss, and conservation. Artists like these, I was inviting them to the museum to interact with the objects and to also select something that they might respond to personally. So here you see John Pereira and Kausalya, who were there on that day, and their respective works, that is some of their works that came out at the end of it. Next, please. We had 10 artists participating in this project, and it was really quite an enriching conversation, quite a wonderful dialogue that even continues now, because their practices, I was able to see the museum and certain objects through their practices and through their varied responses. It was through personal memory, experiences, and it was also some of them who did research specifically for certain projects, and brought it into this wonderful exhibition that we were able to hold at the very end. It provided me also with several layers of understanding that came from these varied perspectives. Next, please. It was important to include the museum at every level. So the conversation was also including Victor and his notions of what art can actually, how art can respond to the objects in the museum. So within the exhibition, I also invited some of the works that are in the Goa Chitra collection. These particular works here are of Katerina Abramova and Loretti Pinto, who both participated in a residency at the museum, and who, in fact, a few years earlier had responded to the objects. Next, please. Here is a beautiful woodcut by Sachin Nayak, who is an artist, a printmaker, and a teacher. And for him, it was an emotional experience coming into the museum, because it took him back to his roots as an agriculturist, someone who was working with the land. So for him, as soon as he entered the museum, these images began to form of himself working with the land again. Next, please. It was a great dialogue. All the artists, of course, are not here in this picture, but those who are missing were remembered very much. We were able to display the work at the Carpe Diem Museum, Carpe Diem Gallery, sorry, in Benaulim, founded by Degal Godino. And we were not able to host this exhibition in Goa Chitra itself, because it was the heavy monsoon time, just like now. And it was raining and pelting tons, so we could not use the spaces in the museum at that time. Next. So to continue with the discussion on the works, we had this wonderful project by Antara Mukherjee, and she responded to 5 different objects in the museum, and she created these series of postcards using the Konkani language names as well as the English names, and then these became this wonderful way to send out messages about the museum, about the objects, and about the artist's work to such a wide variety of people. the postcards were hot cakes. They went all over the world as well. That there is Ramdas Kadekar with his work that was remembering his childhood and his grandmother using an old iron and the smell of the fabric that came off after it was ironed. Next, please. We also, in looking at heritage, understood the notion of using very contemporary new media experiences in order to talk about heritage and talk about loss or history. And here we had this beautiful sound and projection installation by Devesh, who also collects heritage instruments, and Kalpit Gaonkar, who has in fact over the last 3 or 4 years been documenting very seriously oral histories, cultural events, and other elements of loss he finds around his area, Netravali in South Goa. Devesh, I think, is there with us today.
Yeah,
So
hi.
I'd like to invite Devesh to just speak a few words about your project, Devesh.
Yeah, thank you for inviting IFA and Dina. So about my artwork that I have responded through a musical instrument, which musical I did like 7 paintings, which I use soil, a mud as a to explore that medium. So also talking about the time, when I went to the museum, that time I saw the objects which are there. So the object which was there, so it's like a time they have already spent years back, and now they are lying in the studio. So in the museum also they were lying, so it was a time they have already passed. So it was a kind of, that's why I use even a time to explore my medium as a musical instruments. So even the museum, I'm collecting a musical instruments, and then I'm trying to document musical instrument which is getting extinguished. So this was very helpful for me to respond through the musical instrument in the gallery. So about the dhol artwork, the installation which you see on the screen. So this installation I found like I documented the sound of the musical instrument, and I projected the video which was looping the time as well as the painting, the mud I used to paint the rest of my painting. So it was kind of the back to the time which the instrument we have. Once upon a time, these instruments were people were using this instrument, and now they are lying like living in this museum. So this was a time period uh, that I want to showcase. So this is a instrument and also paintings that I have done. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Devesh. I think
Yeah.
that it was really a very evocative project, because the whole notion of time is what we have to consider when looking at objects in a museum, and how time changes these objects, whether they can come alive again, like whether these musical instruments or these trumpets or drums which are in Goakriti, are they going to make
Yeah.
sound again? This is
Yeah.
a sort of question that I think reverberates, and because the museum has so much material that used to be utilitarian, you understand the sort of memory each object has. Whether there
Yeah.
were gestures that used it, whether it was touched by some particular people, what mood was around these objects when they were
Yeah.
being used. So I think that these conversations actually with all the artists who participated was like a journey into communities, into histories, into locations, into very deep into memories of people, and that I think was very enriching. Next, please. So we also included work which was from the workshops within the exhibition, and that in fact was something really important. People really enjoyed looking at them. We also had Rajaram Naik's work. He documented material heritage and its loss around Goa. Next, please. Coming to the final workshop that we did, it was with in collaboration with Ria D'Souza. This was a guided drawing workshop where fiction was something that was really crucial. Ria and I visited lots of locations that were places from where these objects in the museum came, and one of them was the Kushavati Trail. And she decided to actually develop a story that understood the landscape around the river Kushavati and the various things that happen around with the community, like other basket weavers there, other rice growers there. There are fishermen. How did they use these objects? So she wove a story around a particular character that is moving through this landscape. And this story was told to the children after they have experienced the entire museum. And after this, they used their own expression to develop works and, draw and color just based on what they experienced through the story. Next, please. So this was an enjoyable time, and I have to also note that because the museum itself tries to collect objects that are, looking at a very ecologically connected history, we also used only ecological material while hosting the workshops, whether they were plates or glasses or any other items. We tried to serve only local snacks and everything that was made with natural material, and it was difficult, but we did it. Next, please. So just to come to this aspect of ideas sometimes that can be very ambitious but need not actually come to a conclusion, this was another beautiful exploration that we were wanting to produce as part of the fellowship, which is a worksheet handout that would look at a few objects and their different locations in Goa, and work through certain, beautiful exercises that children or adults can take back home with them and complete and remember the objects by. This particular project could not conclude during the fellowship, but it is in progress, and I'm sure we'll finish it one day. Next, please. Do follow Object Speak on Facebook as well as on Instagram. This is a channel that began with the fellowship, and it was something that was wanting for people to look within their own spaces, and not only necessarily within museums, but to look everywhere and find the meanings and stories of objects around them. And this was my inclusion for an interaction with a wider community that is not in Goa, and also to talk about heritage in a digital space, and to identify with this notion of the tangible and the intangible. Next, please. In terms of the entire fellowship, we had a very good rapport, I would say, Aparajita and I, and also Krishnan, and we had many interesting dialogues and discussions. One of them resulted in a project presentation that was done at 6 Asagaon, where we centered around the use of technology, and I spoke about the technology and material of historical objects in a physical sense, and Aparajita and Krishnan actually spoke about the digital. So it was a wonderful melding together of the different extremes that can come through from identifying with a museum space. Next. And of course, I also enjoyed participating in workshops that were done by them. And this is something, of course, they'll speak about, but I thoroughly enjoyed working with the sticker project that they did. Next, to conclude, I would simply like to say that this interaction with the fellowship and the museum is something that will stay alive. It did not finish with the end of the project. It continues interactions with people who are working here with culture, with heritage, as well as with history, and artists who are delving into these projects. They continue to be in dialogue. And I would like to thank everyone who has been part of this. Also, the press that continued to give us wonderful coverage and told more people to go and visit the museum. And also, I think that it brought a large number of people to consider heritage as something important. So now over to you, Aparajita.
Thank you, Leena. And what was really interesting, I think, about this project is that both Aparajita and Leena worked with the same collection, and the kind of engagements that they curated were so different. And yet, I think they collaborated with each other and learned a lot from each other as well. So now you're going to hear Aparajita and Krishnan's work that they did in the following presentation. So over to you, Aparajita.
Thank you, Suman. Thank you, Leena. That was a really, really nice presentation. It kind of brought back everything that we had done and the work we had did together, and how we were kind of on the same track throughout the fellowship, I think. And we were thinking on similar lines. We would meet often. And then finally, the outputs were so different. It just really brought back a lot of memories. Thank you for that. So I'm just going to share my screen. So I would want to start by thanking IFA and especially Suman for supporting us throughout the fellowship. It was a mammoth task we had set ourselves, but we really pulled through. Thank you for that. And also Krishnan, who was an essential part of the project. Even though I got the fellowship, I think we both own it equally. What the fellowship was about, we are calling it LAIRS, which is an exploration of Goan heritage through immersive media. Since the aim of this fellowship was to engage with local communities in new and interactive way, we really thought about how we can bring in this interaction angle into a museum where people tend to walk through, passively kind of consume whatever's at the other end, and kind of walk out with possibly not retaining a lot of what they saw. So since our interest was with exploring the newer tools that we've got through augmented reality, virtual reality, and machine learning, we try to bring together these two things through this fellowship. The idea was to frame Goan heritage through the collection at Goa Chitra, and also from people's, contextualize it using people's understanding of heritage in their own lives, like Leena said, living heritage. A lot of objects within the museum related to everyday objects that were, or recently been out of use, museumized in the way that we've seen a lot of ethnographic museums. So the entire premise of what we did at the fellowship lay with how the curator of the museum, Victor Hugo Gomes, kind of came across. He was extremely passionate, and he was all about contextualizing each object along with a story that came with it about how he procured any object and what it meant to the people who owned it. So since storytelling was so important, he always wanted people to find him and have a chat with him and understand everything that's in there. And he didn't really put up any descriptions as such that people would find in a museum. So we took on this idea, and we decided to incorporate his passion and the idea of storytelling into the digital format and the newer tools that we were using through augmented reality and virtual reality. So through our fellowship, the three final outputs that we came out with were a virtual experience, virtual reality experience that we created and was displayed via these VR headsets. Then we used augmented reality, and we developed an AR-based mobile game through which people could play a treasure hunt throughout the museum, and a playful zine, which is a collection of the stories that a lot of students and children created through the workshops we organize during the year. Krishnan?
Yeah, so a little background about what's augmented reality and what's virtual reality. So basically, augmented reality is just like your Instagram filters, where you have a layer of another information or something else added onto your real world. And it can be enhanced by 3D models, images, whatever is available to you. And the virtual reality part. So virtual reality is basically a little bit more harder to grasp concept. That is, it's basically shifting or replacing your whole reality with a virtual environment which is completely simulated, is completely made, and it can be a 360 video to a completely different surrealistic uh, created world. So these were two of the main new media tools that we have used to kind of bring across Victor's collection, and out of which the first one was called Virtual Sangrahalaya, and it's in essence it's a virtual museum. And over at the museum there are about 4,000 objects, and everyone who comes there gets to visit the museum, the three museums, Goa Chakra, Goa Kriti, and Goa Chitra, for about 45 minutes, in which people kind of haze through the objects. So here what we've done is that we have tried to bring focus into 20 plus objects over there, and we've categorized into 4 different worlds. That's pottery, farming, kitchen, and weaving sections. And we've given voiceovers, and people interact with the world. They look at the objects, and the objects sort of speak to the people, and they can look around the world and see what's happening there with the objects right in front of them in their native, yet a little surreal environments. So in the next slide, you can see this is a sort of world and like sort of things that you see inside the virtual reality headset, where you have a proper setting, but it's also set in a surreal background. The foreground is real, and as you move out, it becomes more surreal. So to get the objects, the normal technique used in usual methods is basically you 3D model the object and you paint it. But here, what we have used is a technique called photogrammetry, where you take photos of the object from different angles, and you sort of stitch them together to create a 3D model, which you can view from any angle, and you can use it in these virtual reality and augmented reality environments. So this, I'll just go through the few slides. So this is what the software looks like for creating the 3D model. So in the left side, you can see a lot of images. That's an image of an object from the museum, where you load the images and you can move ahead. So once it analyzes the images, you get these points in cloud, points in space. Basically, the images, what it calculates is the distance from the camera to the object, and it takes different points from the images, and it creates a sort of point, and it maps the points out in space, in the virtual space, and then you sort of get the object. It's basically like joining the dots which you used to get in like the magazine, children's magazine and all, but in a 3D space. So once you join the dots, you get the 3D object, which you can view from different sides, and then you go on to paint the object basically with the data from the photographs. So it's a very simple process, and this helps in documenting the object in a much more authentic and almost close to real look and feel. Yeah. So this is what the final, this is what the final object looks like, and it looks like a photo, but this is a 3D model, and this helps in creating a bringing in a realistic feel to the virtual reality environment. And so for the virtual reality environment, you can see in the next slide, we have done quite a few explorations in creating the world. So in the starting, it was, we want to create something very surreal, but bring in very real elements and showcase certain things. So we explored with world creation, we explored photogrammetry again in mapping out the spaces and using objects. So you can see in the next slide. So here we have photogrammeted or like taken data of a photo of a space of a house, and we have tried to create different worlds with it. And that's how we made the virtual reality experience. Um, then became the layers exhibition, the main point, that is the augmented reality experience, which is a sort of a game that you can play at the Goa Chakra Museum. The Goa Chakra Museum, as Suman mentioned, it's all about the wheel and like how wheel evolved from one form to the form factor that we see today. And this is basically a treasure hunt, and you have, and your tool, your main tool in this treasure hunt is your phone. um, you move around the museum and you try to find these small paper cards, which is a square paper card, and it will have some scribbling on it. Basically, there is an app where you can open the, through which you open access your phone camera, and you point the app at those square cards, which are called markers. And then you will see that it has some information about the object that is right next to it. And also you will get a small piece of an object which will make sense once you find all the markers. So there are 10 markers throughout the museum, and once you find the whole thing, you will get an object which is from the Goa Chitra Museum. And that is sort of a segue connecting Goa Chakra to Goa Chitra Museum, because we mainly work with Goa Chakra and Chitra.
So the great thing about this game was that it really added an element of play, and the kind of response we got from everybody at the exhibition was really mind-blowing, to be honest. It was only loaded onto 4 phones that we had, and we had just told people that through this phone you can scan a few cards and you have to find all the objects that have this associated card with it. So it became such a huge game, and people formed groups and they started running around the Goa Chakra Museum. It really activated the space itself, unlike a quiet sort of a ritual that one does about walking around the museum. And Victor was also really on board with something like this by activating a space, by having kids running around. I mean, the first fear that everybody has is that you might touch something or you might break something, but he didn't have any such apprehensions, and we just went ahead with people just running around going crazy with this game. And the same sort of a response we had with the VR showcase as well, where even though the virtual reality experience would have lasted 10 or 15 minutes at the max, people were just on and on watching the entire experience again and again for a good 20-30 minutes. And not only did it inspire a lot of curiosity towards the medium, but also then finally the objects within it and the space within which we had placed it. And once they removed the headset, they actually wanted to go and find these objects and where they were placed in the museum and look for more such objects. So the entire element of adding some sort of a curiosity and, you know, just like changing the way one looks at these objects, I think did the job beautifully. Then during the fellowship, we also organized a few workshops. This was something we wanted to do to engage more people and have them tell their side of the story as well when it comes to Goan heritage. So with this, we worked with Lena very closely. She had also organized a lot of workshops, and she was in touch with an organization who had kids in homes who usually wouldn't get such an opportunity to visit museums. So we had huge groups of about 30 to 40 students coming over 3 days. And what we did was we took them through the museum. And at the end, we gave them a lot of art supplies, paper, stationeries, and a huge sheet of stickers. These stickers had some typical Goan elements and a lot of objects from the museum. And what we wanted everybody to do was to use these objects, these stickers, and hopefully have some sort of a correlation from their own lives and understanding from what they saw during the tour, and create a story. And the idea of bringing in these stickers was to not have anybody feel too shy, scared, or apprehensive about their artistic skills. So, and everybody loves creating a collage and sticking stickers everywhere. So this project we did across 3 days, and we had about 65 such stories that everybody created, that we compiled. We photocopied and compiled it in a zine format, and everybody also got to take their own work back with them. This was followed by the final exhibition that we had at the end of the fellowship, where we displayed all three parts of the all three objects that we created during the fellowship, along with Lina's exhibition, which was called Unraveling Stories. They both happened at separate locations, but they were happening at the same time. So there was a good crossover of the audience that Lina was pulling in to kind of come and see our exhibition, and the people that we were pulling in to go and see the other exhibition. There was a great mix of audience as well. It's just an example of how people were just feeling very comfortable sitting absolutely anywhere looking at a VR experience.
Yeah, the whole experience was extremely well received by the people, and the VR, even like we've received quite a lot of people, the customer like visitors throughout the span of the exhibition, and it was a lot of fun seeing how each and everyone did, like even kids and adults, they had their own interpretations of these experiences, and it was great fun seeing them trying to find these objects later. Like if they catch me walking around at the museum, they would come and tell me, okay, I saw that at the Chitra Museum. And people did actually kind of ingrain these objects into their mind because of these two experiences. And it was the same with the AR also. So for the AR experience, people actually started looking for the objects, and even it was usually what used to be a not dull, but at the same time a very structured, very linear storytelling for the Chakra Museum became a much more engaging, active, live, as Aparajita said. People, the whole space was alive, and like there was a lot of sound and like people talking amongst themselves and trying to figure out, okay, where is the next marker? How can we? Okay, if there's some two people at the same time working on it, they'd have this unspoken competition. So it is a great way of interacting with the museum, with the people, and creating a small, temporary yet quite competitive and spirited community.
So as Lina had also mentioned, during the fellowship, as part of the community building initiative, we decided to engage people in North Goa about the things we were doing in South Goa. I mean, it's quite a large state. One thinks Goa is small, but the amount of traveling you have to do really keeps people in their corners. So we organized a talk, which we called Convergence. It was a convergence of a lot of mediums, a lot of attitudes, art historical perspectives, and Lina and my project coming together. So here we basically spoke about our initial ideas, our explorations, and we even displayed some of the initial prototypes we had come up with. We had also organized a panel discussion at the Unbox Festival in Bangalore in February of 2018. And here the intention was to bring together people who had been working with such mediums and tools and learn from them and understand how these actually play out and how people respond to their works. So we had Victoria Pratt from Invisible Flock in the UK, who was speaking about a project called Aurora, where they had created physical and digital installation talking about the climate change, the problem of climate change. Harshit Agarwal is a very popular Indian AI artist. He is one of the first people who actually experimented with machine learning and had his show in Delhi on in 2018 as well. It was all about how the input of a computer, a machine kind of getting creative, and that being part of your artwork is also considered art, and is where we are moving to now. It was very well received as well. Victor obviously spoke about the museum and the museum culture, and how he was looking at adding a layer of interactivity to it and not just having like a typical museum setup. Avinash Kumar is the founder of Quicksand Design Studio, and he is also creator of Antarik Sanchar video game, where he uses Indian heritage, South Indian heritage and culture in the gameplay format. So he uses South Indian temple architecture, dances, and how these kind of form part of what the video game looks like and how people have received. And he's also incorporated classical music into it.
Yeah. So we did quite a lot of experiments with different other mediums also before this, and one of it was actually trying to create this or translate the passion that Victor had for storytelling. So we want to sort of create a sort of a Victor in your phone experience where you walk around the museum, and if you have a question of whatever you're seeing, you can just ask the phone. So sort of creating a chatbot where you just chat to the phone as you pass along. And here we've used with the help of artificial intelligence, which is basically trying to make the device or the app learn about a lot of things and converse with you in an intelligent manner, just like how a human would do. And this was not extremely successful. It was extremely buggy, and there was a lot of miscommunications, and it was not a fluid experience. And then we had to tank it. But in its initial explorations and prototypes, it did show promise. And if this were to be taken forward, this would be a great addition to a museum, adding even more layers to the experience of the museum in a holistic manner.
Like Krishnan just said, all of this is very, very tech heavy production wise. So it's very important for me to mention that we collaborated with Quicksand Design Studio, who had all the infrastructure ready, all the tech ready for us to just exploit. Avinash was happy, I mean, with the output, and he was really excited by the proposal. So he just let us use his equipment and let us take help from some of the people working there as well, who did all the 3D modeling, editing, the final touches and everything. So that worked really well in our favor because we got to experiment a lot. I mean, these objects are all, they make museums and objects more accessible, but they can be very heavy to produce. So that way, I think we really lucked out. The entire intention behind this, I guess, project, and then finally what we learned was to generate new critical and creative approaches to archives and museums, to have interactive exhibitions and not passive consumption of information, and the importance of activity and game-based learning, and the ability to engage young audiences who are very, very tech savvy. So how to kind of tap into that demographic, how to tap into that knowledge base as well.
So basically, it's just about normalizing the whole idea of VR, AR. We're already familiar with a lot of these concepts, even though we don't know the presence of these in our daily lives. Like, say, for example, most of us don't even know that like a concept like machine learning or artificial intelligence is in your daily lives when you open Google, when you
Zomato. You
Zomato.
cannot get to a human being if you have any problems. You have to go through the chatbot. That's all machine learning. Instagram is augmented reality. All the filters are augmented reality, and virtual reality is so easily. I mean, it's very, very. It can be a matter of every household. If you buy a Google cardboard, it'll cost you 400 rupees, for example, and you can just slide in your phone and just watch a few VR experiences. It's a full 360 view of this virtual surreal world.
Yeah. So again, this normalizing is still yet to be done, but I think it's a step forward in that direction.
So this was the team essentially considering Quicksand's collaboration as well. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aparajita and Leena, for these really interesting presentations. In fact, I learned a lot from both of you. And I remember when you first began on your project, Aparajita, I didn't know what things like AR and VR meant. So people in the office used to say, you know, now suddenly Suman is using words which he didn't even know the meaning of before. So thank you both very much for making this museum come alive during your period of a year there. And thanks also to Victor Hugo Gomes, who gave us permission to make all these objects accessible to you and to make, you know, to make new stories out of all of them. I think one thing which really struck me about your work over there and thinking about museums and objects is to think about the social function of museums, how museums help in such a big way, you know, to bring communities together. And now in our, you know, in these but what is heartening, I think, is that in these challenging times when all of us are physically isolated, because of looking at your presentation, Aparajita, I really think that there is a way forward through these virtual connections and, you know, virtual walkthroughs and exhibitions.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much. And I think now I would like to invite Arundhati to take over the questions. But before that, maybe one quick question to both of you. What do you think was the highlight of your experience at the museum, you know? Either of you can take the question first.
Leena, you want to go first?
Oh, I think that the joy of bringing new people into a museum and seeing something that you are putting together affecting the impact of the museum experience itself, that's certainly a highlight. During this experience, you know, that was something that I carry with me now. And I think the second highlight is, which was a good thing in having two of us doing the project at the same time, was the dialogue. Because we were able to talk about a lot of complex things, you know, like ethics and politics and, you know, the challenges of encountering museum objects. All these came together, and for me that also was a highlight, because that dialogue is something that's very important.
That's very true. I think a very important part of this fellowship for me was that Leena and I could actually work together. We were so close by and working in the same space, and we did share the ways we were thinking. So we would have very long chats and we would research together, travel together. And I think that really helped kind of, you know, put things in perspective and then take it forward with what we wanted to do really. And I think other than that, the most exciting thing for, I think, both Krishnan and I was how people responded to it finally. Because it was such a massive experiment for us. We weren't sure if anybody would take it well or not, if Victor would be open to letting us really go crazy with this collection. But it all really came together at the end, and everybody really enjoyed it. So I think very happy.
Okay. So if I haven't said it before, Victor is the founder of all three museums. And if ever you're in Goa, I think you must go and visit it. Arundhati, over to you now.
Thank you, Leena, Aparajita, Krishnan, and Devesh for sharing your projects. We have quite a few questions, and some are very specific to the projects and some are open to both of you. So I'm just going to begin with Leena's project. But just like while we were talking about Victor and, you know, his passion for the museum, one of the things as a funding organization that, you know, Suman and I have been dealing with when working with museums and archives is this whole balance between passion, ownership, and the ability to open yourself to actually allow the objects to be looked at, treated, and reinterpreted by artists and curators. So it's a very fine balance, you know. In some places, we found that the custodians have absolutely no love for the objects, and therefore they don't care whether they take it out of the boxes and share. At the other end, because there is so much love, that they don't want to take it out of the boxes and share. So it's a very fine line that one has to walk. And we are very delighted that through this entire initiative over 3 years, Suman, you and I have met so many people who are so willing to share these objects, both in private and public collections. That is the key, because we can talk about what we can do with museums, what artists can do, what curators can do, but unless custodians actually make it worth their while for these objects to be out there and to be shared, not much can happen. Because it's not like we lack templates, or like the two of you have given us so many templates today. Imagine even if one of these could be done in all the museums in the country, it would be so amazing. So Leena, your first question is, could you talk a little more about the postcards and how that came into being and why, and how it traveled all over the world, like you said?
Okay, so actually I have worked with Antara Mukherjee in the past, and she is a Bangalore-based artist. We worked together on a project that was about food, and one of her interests is to actually use recipes and create these little drawings that can be turned into postcards. And they are recipes that can be shared across, in postcard form. So you send somebody a small note, and there's a recipe on the back of it, and someone can use it. So our initial interaction was at a program that I curated for the Goethe Institute, Max Muller Bhavan in Bangalore. And she had done a series of recipes, and her project was about kokum there. So when this interaction with Goa Chitra began, I immediately thought of her, because there were so many vessels and ladles and spoons and coconut scrapers, and it was just such a delight. So that's how our discussion began, and she produced the postcards specifically for the show. We printed a certain number so that people could pick them up and use them in their communications. So it was about not leaving the objects as they were, but really taking them outside. I hope that answers the question.
And Leena, the second question, this is something you took us through in the presentation, but the person asking it, I think she had lost her connection for a while, so she missed a little bit, which is, you began with saying that you started looking at the objects through various lenses. And if you could just quickly go through what those lenses were.
Okay, so I think that, just to quickly breeze through, one of them was, as an art historian, I was looking at the whole notion of the museum and its many layers. How do objects transform from being just objects to objects in a museum? This museumization process was one of the layers I was looking at. And of course, the various layers associated with it, the cultural, the political, the economic, the social.
Yeah.
It's a very vast subject. The other thing that I was looking at was the Goan landscape, the ecology, and the manner in which the objects that came from this landscape were preserved or being used or lost or whatever it is. So the cultural, the environmental landscape also became part of this lens I was looking through. Then I spoke about gender. Gender was something that came into studying a lot of the objects, because if you see, agricultural objects, they have automatic association with masculinity, whereas domestic objects like the grinding stone, like pots and pans, are associated with a domestic kitchen space, and therefore women. So, this was something that was interesting to look at. And finally, the notion of fact and fiction, because we were looking at oral histories and intangible, material. So a lot of fictional elements I felt should be allowed to come in and out of these stories, particularly because we lack written documentation. We don't have enough of research material on an ethnographic museum like this, or the objects that they have.
Okay. I will move with the next question to Aparajita. Aparajita, tons of questions on how, so I'm going to frame it together and ask you. On AR, VR, obviously our audience today is very excited about all the possibilities. So some questions are about its cost. So everybody loves the fact that, you know, this is what it enables and what can actually happen. But because most museums, especially the small ones, need funding and are always resource starved. So what about the cost? So if you could talk about what is possible at what cost levels, or what other ideas. So that is one. The other question about AR really is it still available? As in, can it still be downloaded from an app store? And if so, then how does this kind of usage of AR, VR enable our future imaginings of exhibition? And I guess people are also asking it specifically because of the situation we are in right now. So,
Yes.
yeah.
I know it makes a lot of sense to try and adapt all these tools to what's happening right now. But I do have to say that the cost of production, one cannot deny, is quite high. You need a very powerful machine, a very powerful computer to actually process each and every object that you want to 3D model in the photogrammetry process, right? So a regular laptop will probably not be able to do a good enough job, but it's not impossible. For example, if you have a Mac, you can easily download a software, and even you can click photos with your phone and it actually processes it really well. So the thing is that we don't even realize, but the technology that we have in our hands is very, very capable. Like, we only use our MacBook Pros for literally nothing, for Google Drive and nothing else, for presentations, but actually it's capable of so much more. It can run very heavy softwares. All the smartphones that we get are even loaded with AR technology. And Krishnan, you were mentioning that there's a new phone release now, right?
Yeah, so there have been talks about Huawei releasing phones with LiDAR scanning on the back. So people are moving in the direction of sort of documenting it not just by a photo or a video, but more than that. There are social platforms for sharing photogrammetry models. But at the same time, this costing will go down in the future, just like how if we normalize this tech. Say, for example, the same sort of cardboard that you find over here in India and Israel. In Israel, it's priced at 100 rupees, whereas in India, it's priced at 950. So once it's normalized, the prices will level down, and then it will be a household item, just like how all of us have CDs, which are obsolete right now. But at the same time, we will have these sort of things. And are, like as I said, producing a movie might require quite a lot of heavy machinery, but to see a movie, you just need a phone.
But yeah, I have to add, like, when we started the fellowship, my first aim in life was to photogrammetry an object myself. And I literally took photos from my phone and put it on the MacBook Pro 2013, and I had a very beautiful model. So it's not impossible. Definitely you need the skill to be able to adapt it into a VR environment, for example, and create a format that is compatible with, say, a video you can upload on YouTube and people can just slide it into their cardboard, Google Cardboard, and view it. So it's about knowing what all you can do. And the thing is, very few people are doing it right now. So that community also at some level needs to come together and figure out what all we can do and how it can help the current situation, the museums and the artists to kind of go forward from here. But if you want to go high resolution, really, good quality,
fancy graphics and stuff, it's going to be expensive.
So even what we did, we considered lo-fi, but it's lo-fi to a point where we had a very powerful computer because of Quicksand Design Studio. So we were able to process so many images. We could process, how many do you have, Krishnan? You had about 40?
Yeah, 45 objects, and which is about 8,000 images. And we had the infrastructure to try it out. Like, we had multiple headsets, VR headsets, options to try it out. Like, whatever you name it, we had it. And so it was a completely seamless we did not know one whole side of the whole development until unless we got out of the whole quicksand bubble. Then we realized, okay,
Yes.
if we just
Even
want to,
at quits end, we had to
yeah,
really fight for resources because the office would run through the day. So Krishnan and I would sit at the studio from 8 p.m. onwards through the night because that's the only time the machine would be free.
Aparajita, one question about what was the feedback from the people because I'm sure not too many people would have experienced this in any museum before, at least not in India. So one question is about how did people react to this experience of the augmented reality?
okay.
So augmented reality, I think people took really well also because they were kind of familiar with the concept because of Instagram. And the moment you add a layer of gameplay to anything, everybody's running around and playing. There were old people trying to figure out what's happening and I really want to find this last object, and really young kids kind of gathering together, huddling over one phone and turning it into a bit of a competition. So the feedback was really great, but obviously the point here would be to scale it up and make it a permanent part of the museum and not just for an exhibition, for example.
Yeah.
Because we were heavily relying for the tech on a third party, for example.
And even in this whole aspect of people enjoying it, it was also a challenge in disguise because so in the 3 or 4 days that we exhibited it over at the museum, on the second day the guides came and tried out the whole experience of VR and the AR, and on the third day they were quite aggressive towards the whole experience and they would come and correct each of it because the visitors would come and say, okay, you don't need guides anymore because this is much more informative and we get to know more about the whole museum this way. So this was extremely it's a more of like a political challenge to navigate it through the space, and you can find the balance. Basically, you can find the balance and create the layers like the museum as a space and the guide and the chatbot and the AR and the VR and something as tangible as some like Lina's artworks that she has played, and like all these things can be layers to the museum, enhancing the experience.
Lina, I'll go to you for the next question. This is really about your choice of objects. So, I mean, among all these like hundreds and thousands of objects that were there in these museums, how did you choose the objects and how did you place them in the context of the history of the museum? And what kind of work or methodology did you employ to draw that out?
All right. So I think that I have to say that I allowed it to happen very organically because I was already talking to so many people, so many artists and collaborators. The objects that started standing out were the ones that, you know, became prominent in the end, and the stories that were associated with those objects brought in the landscapes, the communities, the histories, the languages, everything along with them. So I have to say that it was not deliberate and it was very organic. And I think that that's the way also I enjoy working as a curator. A lot of the decisions were made by other people who were participating in the project. So that would be my answer. Yes.
Okay. For both the projects, I'm so happy actually to see that there are so many, like, congratulations, fabulous team. I don't know if you guys are seeing it, but it really fills our heart to see that so many people today have been so appreciative about this. There is one question about how some of these ideas that you've used as template could be used as templates for other museums. Because the person who's asking feels that the museums have failed to bring in involvement of larger audiences, and certainly sees the different strategies that both your projects employed as ways for bringing in very diverse kinds of audience into the museums. So I'm sure Suman and I will have something to say about it, but what, as artist curators, what would you say? How can these be used as templates in other museums? Lina, you want to go first and then Aparajita?
Oh, okay. I think that, basically we are looking at a museum culture in India, which is already, somewhat poor.
Yeah.
These engagements that we had the opportunity to develop was like, it's like a dream come true, because barring a few museums in India, there are not too many opportunities to add these layers, to use their project title. I think that what IFA is doing is very important, because you have recorded everything that we or others are doing within museums, and you are publishing the material. You have a website that makes these templates available, maybe not in forms that can be directly copied, but certainly for research. So I think that again, to refer to something that Aparajita said, as a community, I think we need to understand how we can scale this up, how we can make it more accessible, or produce some sort of platform that that shares certain templates for free as well. Like very simple templates of how you can develop some sort of interactive medium for museums to speak more. I think that these are something that are important, but certainly we do have to deal with a lot of different things, like personalities, as you mentioned, like the limitations of a museum budget, like the kind of people who are employed, like the languages that are used when people interact. So, these things need to be worked out, but there are many possibilities. And I think that we can certainly do something about making it more available.
Aparajita, you want to add in something to that?
I think Lena has said everything, but but just like somebody in the Q&A section has mentioned, like right now there's so much going on, and museums are fighting to even keep their current employees on board and not have to fire anyone. In the middle of all of that, how do you really scale it up, right? I mean, you need more resource, and there has to be some sort of a community building, like Lena said. There's no other way to kind of keep this community alive and keep the museums kind of going. Even though a lot of museums have gone online in some way. I mean, the simplest way everybody has done it is they've gone online and have done virtual tours and things like that. But there can definitely be more ways of spreading the kind of digital presence in every museum.
I think with the whole idea of museums, I don't know how correct this is, but I feel museums are sort of like the physical museums that you see are sort of a tangible vessel for the intangible content that it has. So a museum should not bar it, the physical presence of the museum should not bar it from propagating what it has.
Yeah, true.
I guess it's very possible.
Yeah. Suman, do you want to add something? I have something to add, but I wanted to hear your point of view also. Suman, put your microphone on.
In fact, Arundhati, if you remember when we did begin this program, one of the things we were thinking of was that in India, we have wonderful collections, which nobody really gets a chance to see or have access to them. So the whole point, in fact, of our archives and museums program is to give people the chance to, get access to these wonderful collections, and also, using the infrastructure that is available. So it was just resources from the museums themselves, their collections, and how they could be used in a better way. Because unless museums come alive and are used, they become mausoleums where, it becomes completely pointless. So in fact, I think, Arundhati, this was the aim of our program. What are the different, and I think these templates that they have, I mean, there are a few basic things, it's just building up communities through things like, it could be simple things like talks and, involving the community itself to talk about object histories. So that doesn't require, I think all you need is imagination, actually, to see how you can make all these various things come alive. And I think IFA is trying to facilitate that in some way.
True. Yeah, I just feel three things here. That first, there has to be the will from the museums and archives. There has to be a will of the management, of people who are running these places, who believe, they have to believe that this material has to be accessible. They have to believe that they have to reach a large number of people. I think in many cases, what happens is just the fact that they have these objects is sort of enough. It's like a bookstore that is happy to have the books on the shelf and doesn't really care whether people walk in, read them or buy them. So the will of management of museums, the body of management, in wanting to this work to actually reach is the first problem that we all of us face, and which is something that we need. The second is for artists, intellectuals, curators, scholars to find interest to work with this. I mean, sometimes we've had the best of opportunities and we haven't had proposals. So we've discussed, sometimes it's amazing that artists and curators like Aparajita and Leena, for very little funding, for very little money, actually give so much of their life and time to make this happen. I mean, honestly, Leena and Aparajita could have been doing a residency in Switzerland and an exhibition at the next Biennale somewhere. To take time out to go to your neighborhood museum and spend the time and effort to do it, artists should also come forward and be a stakeholder of this whole thing. And finally, I would say about visitors. Visitors, community people will have to demand that their museums give them more. So they have to volunteer, they have to get involved, they have to bring, like schools have to bring their children into the museum and say, what program do you have for us? Do you have somebody telling this story or not? And we have to get more demanding about, all this is ours, it's not anybody else's. So we have to get demanding about what we want from these places. And finally, of course, support and funding. And it's not enough to say that, so every time you buy something in a museum, you're adding to that support. Donate to a museum. If your museum has become a friend of the museum, then do become a friend of the museum, because the museum needs that kind of support, I feel, to kind of, make all these models and templates possible. I think there's one
Arundhati, just 1 second. I have one other thing to add. I think you also need directors with vision for the museum.
Absolutely.
So it's unless these people, I mean, we worked with so many museums now over these 6 years, unless the director of the museum has a vision for it, I think it's difficult for things to happen without that vision.
Yeah, there is a very interesting comment that's come saying that the whole point is to make the visitor from a passive to an active participant.
Yeah.
True. There's one last question that I have here. How can museum pieces live on among people outside the museum space, even after they have visited the collection? So I'm guessing that when you've walked out of the museum and you go home, how do you still live with these objects? How do these objects still impact you? Do you want to just add your comments to that question?
So I'll go first. I think that, the whole idea of during this fellowship of creating some kind of printed material was to allow people to pick up something small and then go back home and then mull over it and think about it, etc. The other thing was the reason why I started Object Speak, which is the Facebook page, which is it's social media, Instagram. It's and in fact, I took classes from Aparajita to start my Instagram page, but that's all part of the technology learning that I had from them. To start to run those pages, which I've been now running for a year or more, I've understood that these are things that make people look at or remember museums, identify with objects with particular histories, identify with a sense of belonging, a sense of enriching relationships with anything that is around them. I think that for me, those kinds of spaces are something that can carry through beyond anything else. They cannot replace a physical interaction, but they can definitely augment it. They can allow them to live in memory.
So augmented memory as well as augmented reality, Leena. Yes.
That's a good one. We'll remember this.
Yeah, Aparajita, you want to add in your comments on this? How can people live with these objects beyond the museum?
Yes, I mean, I guess it differs from museum to museum, but when it came to Goa Chitra Museum, the point was that most of these objects were very relatable. I mean, a lot of these objects you see in your real life or an evolved version of it. So it's about really looking in your own surroundings and identifying how it is literally the same thing, but maybe just the material has changed or the function has evolved and turned slightly more complex. But most of the objects in there are in our kitchens today, for example.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Krishna and I actually did try to literally augment some of the objects that we were 3D modeling onto the merchandise that Victor had. So we wanted this app also to incorporate the ability to detect some augmentation onto his merchandise. So whenever you felt like you needed to see something, or at least just again activate the passive merch, would be to add another interactivity to it.
Okay. Okay, we have, yeah. So I think we will end now. Suman, I'm getting so nostalgic about, 6-7 years ago when you first joined us, and we had a little archival fellowship around that time. And I think you had just come back from the
Berlin, yeah.
And she came and said, we have to do a program like that here. We have to open up our museums and we have to get artists to talk. And then my thing was obviously, yeah, Suman, we have to do all of that. Where do we get the money? And a wonderful conversation opened up with the Tata Trust. So I would like to specifically and very genuinely thank the Tata Trust for supporting us for 3 years and all these 35 projects that came out. And there are such amazing examples now that everybody in the museum sector, artists, etc., can use. And thanks to all those 7+7 museums and archives who didn't feel like they would lose out or we would run away with their precious stuff. They let us in, they allowed us to work. So Victor, specifically for this, thank you. If you're watching, thank you for this, giving us this opportunity. To all the artists and curators who worked in this program, Leena, Aparajita, Krishnan, Divesh, and all the artists and other animators that worked with you in the project, a big thank you to them. And thank you to the audience actually, who embraced all the new and experimental stuff you were doing with them, on them, and all the pictures from your project seem so exciting. And today, thank you to everyone who's come and listened to us. We had quite an audience between here and Facebook Live. So a big thank you to the audience. And please know that IFA comes back with Throwback Thursdays every alternate Thursday. So we will be back next on August 6th and at 6:30 this time. And what we will have with us is a project from our project 560, which is our city-based, Bangalore city-based work. And I will not tell you anymore because you have to watch us on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram to find out which project we are going to share with you next time. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us, and bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.